Good morning, everybody. So we're talking about these different angles from which we can look at the gospel in this series. We're, coming over here, we stand and we look at what Jesus has done and we see his sacrifice. We see his love. We see the depth of our sin and God's judgment. And we stand over here and we look at the angle of the gospel, same story, same Jesus, but here we see the desperate love of a God who is willing to take on pain to be with us, who doesn't look away from the realities of life. And then we stand from another vantage point, and it sparkles in a new way. And what it makes me think of is about a decade ago when I was ring shopping, right? I had to pick out a ring for my future wife, and so I went to the jeweler's, and I picked out a band, and then we sat down. The jeweler took the different stones, and he put them under a magnifying glass, which was really important for me with my budget. We look under this magnifying glass at the stone, and he takes his tweezers out, and he rotates it, and he rotates it, and he rotates it so I can see it from all these different angles. Because he wants me to see the beauty of the whole stone. He wants me to be drawn into the beauty of the whole diamond. And it's the same thing for us today. We're looking at the different angles of the gospel because we want to see the beauty of every possible angle of our Jesus. Jesus is the good news. Who he is, what he's done, how he is exalted, and how he has drawn us into his family. From every possible angle, let's get this, so that then we live following him with a deeper and a fuller love for him and understanding of what he's called us to. Angles. The angle we're looking at today is new creation. And a lot of people crave new creation. This isn't novel for Christianity, but lots of people crave this idea that the future can be better than the present, that there's some sort of disconnect that's going to happen where maybe God enters in and breaks things up, and then he brings this new creation, this renewed utopia off in the future. You see this in Islam. You see this in ancient Egyptian cultures. If you step out of like sort of this tradition and into a more Eastern tradition, you see concepts like reincarnation and nirvana or being enlightened, right? These are all ideas of the future can be better than our present. I'm not satisfied with my present, and so I look somewhere for a hope that the future could be better. We do the same sort of thing in a more modern, maybe if you will, atheistic sort of Western space with people like, say, Karl Marx, right? Karl Marx comes to the people and he says, I want to offer you a better future, a utopia off in the distance. And the path to get there is not through divine intervention, it's through human intervention. It's through revolution, right? To get to the new creation on the other side. More personally, how many of you guys know who Jordan Peterson is? Does that name ring a bell for anybody? A couple people have heard about him, right? So Jordan Peterson is this popular psychologist. He might not use this exact language, but what he does is he says, how would you like new creation for you personally? You as an individual to experience new creation. What you need is discipline. You want to change your current reality? Discipline, responsibility, slay your current demons and dragons so that you can get to the other side and you can have this existence as a capable, desirable, successful adult. We crave a future better than our present. And religion offers us one option, divine intervention. And there's lots of other options out there too, human effort. And Jesus offers us new creation as well. Jesus gives a vision of the sort of new creation that he's talking about in a vision that he gives to this follower of his named John. Jesus at this point has died. He's been resurrected. He's glorified with the Father in heaven. And then he sends this vision to this follower named John in Revelation chapter 21. Let's take a look at that. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the old heaven and the old earth had disappeared. There's a couple things that we can observe here. First of all is the scope. When Jesus says he's bringing us new creation, he's not talking about just my story. Jesus' gospel is not just about you and him. The Bible begins with God creating the world, and it ends with him renewing and recreating the whole world. We can see here that it's not just a new heaven off in the distance and in the future. I don't know if you've ever seen that before or thought about that before, but like his vision for eternity is not us on clouds with harps. His vision is a new heaven and a new earth. It's epic, it's grand in scope. Along with this is kind of just a snapshot here, but along with this comes further descriptions where if I can summarize it and condense it down, I know this is my stab at that, the new creation will feature sinlessness and God's presence. if there's something different and unique and new about eternity, it will be the presence of God, and it will be the absence of sin and everything that goes with it. He talks this through in the vision in a few different ways, but this is what Jesus offers. We crave new creation. He hears that. He knows that. And he says, the good news is I offer you this future. All right? But, for sake of argument, what if Jesus' version of new creation isn't something that you crave? Like, what if that is not compelling? And it might be that way for a few reasons. One, that could sound like escapism, like this is the world that we're in. Or maybe that sounds scary because you feel like you belong here and now, right? You fit here and now. There's more than one reason why we might feel like that future is more scary than it is exciting. I have two ideas, though. I want to explore this in at least two different ways. The first one is there's an earthiness to today. And we don't always talk about that earthiness about eternity in the way that we think about the future of Jesus' creation. But there's an earthiness today that we find really compelling, that makes us feel like we're grounded and that we belong and that we want to be here. And so I think of my grandparents' cabin up in Lake Lawrence out in Outing, Minnesota. You'd go up there and we'd spend the evening, playing out and stuff, and we could look across the lake. And the sunset begins. And it's warm, these warm yellows and oranges and purples and stuff like that, and it's all great. And then you have the lake reflecting that, and you have the trees on the other side. And this is one of my favorite things ever, is as the sun gets further and further down, the trees go from being like a dark green and shadowed to just simple pitch black silhouettes with all those beautiful warm colors behind it. And it's beautiful. And you just feel grounded and like, this is where I belong. This is what the romantic poets would talk about when they said, we don't need to escape nature. We need to go back to nature. Okay? Romantic poets aside, there's something beautiful, compelling, and wonderful about God's world as it is. We belong here. Or I think of it like this. I love burgers, and I love pizza, and I love sharing burgers and pizza with my friends. I feel alive. I feel grounded. I feel like this is me. When we're sharing those things over a dinner or over a lunch, and then afterwards you have the dessert, and the dessert is perfect, and it hits the spot, and then you play a board game, or you sit and you talk, and whatever it is, and I don't ever feel more human than when I'm doing those things. And that feels like a this world thing. Do I really want to live in a future if that's not part of my future? So maybe Jesus' new creation doesn't get us excited. The human struggle is the other way I wanted to think about that this morning. I just want to acknowledge this. The human struggle can be really profound and compelling. Nobody really says that people are perfect. Nobody really says that humans are just absolutely good through and through. There's nothing wrong with whatever we do. Nobody says that. We all know better than that. But what we find incredibly compelling is this pursuit that people have of trying to be better and trying to be good, trying to understand what it means to treat people with dignity and with love. And we fall flat on our face as we're trying to do that over and over and over again. And yet in the struggle, there's something beautiful. So I think of Pixar. Okay, so Pixar has these different principles that they use when they're telling a story. One of those principles is you don't tell a story about someone succeeding. You tell a story about a character struggling to do the right thing. So I think of Toy Story with Woody, right? Woody screws it up royally at the beginning of the story. He's jealous over Andy, he hates Buzz, and he screws up all the relationships. And then he struggles for the whole rest of the story to set it right. And he gets it wrong a bunch. And yet there's something relatable, compelling, good in that struggle and in that pursuit to grow. Is a future where we are all static, perfect people exciting, compelling? Don't you want to keep growing? I kind of want to keep growing. And I want to be around people who keep growing. And so here's what I want to say. The Bible is for the earthiness of this world. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. Basically, you see the world, and God is like, this is good, and this shows that I am good. So he's for that. Don't worry about it. Second, the human struggle. The Bible calls us to this prior to sin entering the world. Okay? Prior to the brokenness of this world, the Bible calls us to the potential to develop and grow and change, because it says you're supposed to, humanity, bear the image of God in this world, carry the image of God in this world, go out into the world as it is, explore it, rule it, understand it, and help it flourish. That requires development, that requires growth, that requires change. That was good before the human struggle with sin. And it was transformed. That call was transformed by the struggle with sin. But the future in Jesus' new creation is not going to be two static spaces, but we are going to be freed again to go back to this call to explore the universe and bring God's glory and image into it as we discover more and more of what that is. We will grow not from sin to goodness, but from goodness to goodness to goodness to goodness. Okay, so that said, I don't know what my next slide is. What is it? All right. Loving the world sorry, guys. Loving the world to the point that we dismiss divine intervention, though, requires a sort of tunnel vision. Like if we focus on the goodness of the world and whatever that thing is, whether it's lakes and meals or just the desire to grow, to the point that we say, you know what? I don't want a new creation. I don't want God's divine intervention. I like the world as it is. To be there, we have to be excluding a lot of stuff that's going on today as well. To illustrate this, I want to go through 3 examples. And we're going to start dark and heavy, and then we're going to kind of get a little bit lighter as we go. So just so you know, we're going to go big, go deep, and then we're going to kind of come out of that to something a little bit lighter. But here's the first one, 50 million. Big number, 50 million. I got this number from the International Justice Mission. International Justice Mission is an organization that fights organized human trafficking around the world. So 50 million is a big, scary number. And this is their estimate of how many people today are owned by other people. 50 million. This is our world. This is our reality. This is what humans get up to today. Now, 50 million is a big number. It's hard to wrap your heads around. So to scale this in, or to help us see this, that's 6 people out of every 1,000 people on the planet are owned by someone else. 6 people out of every 1,000. And I'm willing to bet that those 6 people would not be content with the world as it is and would covet and crave divine intervention and a change and a hope for a different future. Another way of thinking about it is the population in Minnesota. Okay? Think all the way to the northernmost tip of Minnesota down to La Crosse, Minnesota. Everybody you've encountered in rush hour traffic, the whole population of the state is 5 million. 10 Minnesotas are the people today on the planet owned by others. This is not okay. And this is our world. This is our brokenness. This is why we need Jesus to come with the good news that he's going to make it right and bring justice and bring a new creation. Second example, death today is romanticized, right? So death is this thing that we all know that we're going to deal with, and it's a reality of the world as it is. And so what do we do to make sense of it? We romanticize it. I think of the way that we do this with our stories. So we tell stories about people who are in this romantic relationship, but it turns out somebody has a terminal illness on the one side, and the story plays out, and their love is profound, and it ends at the end because the person dies. And the thing that makes the story a tearjerker and makes it so beautiful is partially the drama of the death at the end. And so death gets romanticized as this thing that just welcomes us with this, wow, life. Or we tell the other sort of story where like somebody, like a hero, like Iron Man, lays down his life and inspires everybody as he gets in the way of death coming towards all of the universe and the world or whatever, and he lays his life down, and we're like, wow, inspiring and exciting. And death ends up being this romantic thing that we look at and we say, actually, without death, would we even value life? Like, death is part of what makes life special. How could we imagine a world without death? But that's not, I don't know if that's necessary. I don't know if that's necessary. I don't know if that's logical. Let me put it this way. Okay, imagine you're in World War I, right? Trench warfare, terrible, really, really, really terrible. You're in this trench. Down this side, you've got gangrene, and down this side, you've got trench foot and trench rot, right? Death is just eking into your little trench that you live in. If you stand up, you get shot. You're literally surrounded by death. What makes sense for you to do in that moment is to try to stay alive for as long as possible, right? To try to stay away from the gangrene as far as you can, to keep yourself as clean as you can, to not put your head up, to try to treasure life for as much as you possibly can because you can see how easily you could lose it in that space, right? That's the reality surrounding you. What also makes sense is for you to long to get back home and to remember what it's like. What do you have to live for going back home? All that makes sense, and death certainly brings the value of life into focus. What doesn't make sense is for you to come to the belief that this is all that life is, that this trench is the totality of life. And death just surrounds people in trenches. This is life. Today, we're in a trench. And there's a war between good and evil. There's a war between God, the giver of life, and humans who have sided with an enemy who wants to steal, kill, and destroy. And so we're in a trench, and death reigns. We don't need to romanticize it. We need to look beyond it for the life that it constantly interrupts, for the life that our Jesus offers us, for the new creation promise that there is a valley that we were called to go live in, that there is a paradise that we were called to live in, that there's a homestead, a farm, there's flowing rivers and beautiful spaces that we were made for on this planet and on this earth, not get stuck in the trench vision and romanticize death. Okay. Final example. I promise this one's a little bit lighter. New Year's resolutions, okay? How many of you guys are feeling good about your New Year's resolutions? It's February, right? So we got through January. Forbes, this is their stats from 2024, so looking back at 2023. Here's some numbers, right? So first off, 9%. 9% of the New Year's resolutions that people put into place failed by January, by the end of January. Now, I looked at that, and I was disappointed with that because I was actually thinking that was going to be a bigger number. I was like, it's going to be more dramatic if that's like 60% of all New Year's resolutions fail. But then I was also disappointed because I was like, wait a minute, it's February. My New Year's resolutions are still going okay. I thought I was bucking a curve. Like, I thought I was doing well. Actually, no, only 9% fail. Where we start failing, 57% is in months 2 through 4. So if I want to do better than average, I've got to make it to month 5. Okay? And then I'm beating the average. But if I let go in there, what good does it really do? It's not until you get to the end of the year that you're talking about life change, right? That's the number that really matters, and that number is 7%. 7% of New Year's resolutions will make lasting life change. 93% of New Year's resolutions won't. Now, if I tell you the hope for the future is in this classroom, these students are going to take us in the future. They are going to solve all the world's issues, and we're super excited about that. I'm like, that sounds amazing. They must be straight A students, right? They're like, well, most of them are scoring around 7% on their tests. I'm not super optimistic about the future. Just to be honest, 7% of us saying we can change and be better humans is successful. This is why I don't think that we can turn to humanity and be like, we got this. We're going to end all these issues, and we just need to push in harder. If we bump that to 8%, that's still 92% failure. We can't change ourselves, at least not on this level. Okay? Doesn't mean that I think that we should stop trying. Doesn't mean that I think that you should stop using discipline, that you should stop pushing back against injustice or any of that stuff. I am thankful for all of the ways that people fight evil and continue to push back death and try to bring health and wholeness to each other. Absolutely, go for it. But in terms of getting to a new creation where this stuff is solved, we need Jesus. We need divine intervention. And the good news is, he's here for it. He comes with this resurrection power. And so Jesus' good news to us, Jesus' gospel to us, is the promise of new creation. And here's how he accomplishes that. First off, he starts by coming into the world. God comes into the world to be human, and he's born the same way that everybody's born. And then he becomes a young boy, and he eats meals with his family, and he learns to do what his parents ask him to do and stuff like that, and he makes friends. Very human stuff to do. He eventually finds a vocation. He starts working. And as he's teaching in that vocation, he gathers people around him and he extends hospitality to other people, and he receives hospitality from other people. He shares meals with all sorts of people. Very human. He enjoys retreats to mountaintops. He enjoys time by the lake and down by the sea. He spends a lot of time in a boat crossing the sea. He gathers fishermen around him to hang out with. He is so human, here, present in this world, and he dies like we do. And on a cross, he goes there and he gives us the interpretation and the understanding for what death is. It is the judgment for our rebellion, for our sinfulness, for the types of stuff that we get up to that gets wrapped up in big numbers like 50 million, or all the ways that we fall short of even trying to be good on a daily basis. He takes the judgment and the wrath and all this different stuff to him on the cross, and he nails my sinfulness there with him. He nails my shame and my guilt there with him, and he dies. And on the third day, like Jesus, he comes back. Well, actually, he doesn't come back. I guess Jesus left altogether. It doesn't matter. Sorry, bad. Didn't make sense. Jesus comes back to life on the other side of the grave, and he does what? He hangs out with his friends. He enjoys some fish. He sets up a fire by a lake and then calls people over to come have a meal with him. He breaks bread. He embraces his friends. They embrace him. He is still human. He is still embodied, and he still belongs to this world. And he forms our hope and our anticipation and our excitement about what the new creation is going to be like. And so what we learn is that the feature, the distinction between the new creation that Jesus offers and the one that we're living in today is not earthlessness. What it is sinlessness. When Jesus died, he took our sin with him and he left it in the grave. And when he comes back out, he gives us a life that is still embodied and that is still very earthy. And he says, come dwell with me as my brothers and sisters in the life that I have. I'm sharing with you. It is a sinless life. And so all of the ways that death steals life from us in the grave of Jesus and all that different stuff, it's all wrapped up with sinfulness. And if sinfulness is left behind, death is conquered. And the new creation will be a place where we are not separated from God because of sinfulness. His presence will be a feature. Where we are not separated from each other because of our sinfulness. We'll have relationships like we've never had relationships before. And where we are not separated from this world and the life in this world because of sinfulness. Death will be a thing of the past. Romans describes it like this. Paul, speaking to the Roman church, says, the creation itself is looking forward to the day when it will join God's children in glorious freedom from death and decay. For we know that all creation has been groaning like the pains of childbirth right up to the present time. I don't really know how to imagine a world that doesn't have a death cycle in it. But I actually think that sounds pretty interesting. Like if you wrote a sci-fi novel where there was no death in it, or a fantasy novel and the feature of your world was there's just no death, I would want to read that. How do you explore that? What does that look like? And to know that Jesus comes to us and says, this is the future that I've made you for. I want to be there. And to know what that new creation is like. To be embodied in a place where death no longer separates me from the people I love and the God I love. Said all this, I think this sounds like good news. It could still sound, though, a little bit like escapism. Like Jesus just solves all our issues and we get to go off into the future with him, and that sounds nice, right? Maybe. I don't think it is, though. And this is why I love this series, Angles, because what we get to do then is we get to take this beautiful truth about the new creation and we get to rotate it another degree, and it sparkles not in the future, but in the present. So we read what Peter has to say about this new creation life. Through Christ, you have come to trust in God And you have placed your faith and hope in God because he raised Christ from the dead and gave him great glory. You were cleansed from your sins when you obeyed the truth. So now you must show sincere love to each other as brothers and sisters. Love each other deeply with all your heart, for you have been born again, but not to a life that will quickly end. Your new life will last forever because it comes from the eternal, living Word of God. We talk about the new creation like it's a promise. That's appropriate. It is Jesus' promise to us that the world is not always going to be the way that it is today. It is a promise for the future, but it is also a call to action for the present. Jesus' gospel of new creation is a call to us to be new creations today. The feature, we talked about this. Okay, so I mentioned this a second ago. The feature of the new creation is not earthlessness, it's sinlessness. And that new life of sinlessness is something that Jesus has empowered for you in the present. The new identity that will live forever in a sinless space is who you are today because of what Jesus has already done. So that text we looked at a second ago, it features all these past tense verbs. Jesus has already been risen from the dead. Jesus has already been glorified. Jesus has already cleansed you from sin. This is already done. And now he turns to us and says, given the fact that this stuff is already done, my call to you is to love each other well, deeply, sincerely. Why? For you have been born again. Your new life will last forever. The new life that we're supposed to be like living out of today is the exact life that we will have for all of eternity. There's a new version of Peter who's been reborn, not because I did something about it, but because Jesus did something about it. And he is alive today. He is empowered by the Spirit of God. And it is the Spirit's desires that give the new Peter his desires. It is the Spirit's strength that gives the new Peter his strength. And so I'm welcomed into a brand new struggle, a brand new human struggle, where the old Peter and the new Peter go at it. And the old Peter has a vision for what it means to be human. And it typically revolves around him being the center of the world. And the new Peter has a vision for what it means to be human. And it revolves around God being the center of the world. And the Spirit knowing what I was made for better than I know it myself. And my struggle today is to say yes to the new and to say no to the old. And it's hard. It's real, and I get it wrong. But it's an opportunity every time I get it wrong to rediscover that this was not my effort. It was not based off of how well I perform for God. But just like no baby is born because it chooses to be born, no baby is born because it puts in the effort to be born. A baby is born because doctors and mothers bring that baby to life and bring that baby out. Sorry, that's a weird image. You're not? I don't know. I am alive because Jesus has made me alive, because the Spirit makes me alive. And he'll get the credit for every good thing that ever comes from me. And he will be pleased with all the good that he accomplishes through me, and he will be pleased with all the opportunities that I give him to show me grace and forgiveness and love. It is about him and his glory. He's the creator of the new life in me. So, what does this look like? Paul calls it, or excuse me, not Paul, but Peter says, it looks like love. That's a great summary of it. Love deeply, love well, love the way that Jesus loved. For you, I think that can get kind of interesting. It's an interesting question. What does it mean for you to be a new creation? There's a new version of you that the Spirit is creating. It's you. It's more deeply you than the version that you would make for yourself. And the new version of you has the desire to love, to find joy in life, to be at peace, to be gentle, to exercise self-control, to be kind. All these things the Spirit gives us, which fit in the new creation, but they have been shared now with the old creation so that we get to bring the love of Jesus and the new creation into all these different spaces where we live. Where do you live? What does it look like for you to be a new creation there with your family and with your kids, with your parents, with your workplace, right? With your friends? I think it's an intriguing question, and it's not a great question that I can dialogue with you from here. So unashamedly, go to a life group and have the conversation in a life group where you can have this conversation about what does it look like for me and my family to imitate Jesus and live out of this new created life. Have the conversation with a friend. What does it look like for me to put this in action? What is Jesus calling me to say yes to? What is Jesus encouraging me to let go of and say no to? And have the conversation there. Because all of this sounds good, but if it doesn't turn into action, if there are not steps that we take as a result of it, then we stay the same. And we don't get to taste and experience the goodness of the new creation. So talk with each other, sort it out, listen to what the Spirit prompts you to in that conversation, and then follow Jesus and help others do the same. Pray with me. Jesus, I ask that you would be clear with us. We can be thick sometimes, and we can get stuck not knowing what it is that you're trying to say to us or call us to. We can insert shame and guilt into places it has no space. So be gentle with us and lead us forward. Show us the desires your Spirit would have to place in our heart and to birth in us this new way of living that brings your love to the world around us and allows us to rest in your love. Thank you for giving us a hope for the future and a taste of that hope in the present to share with the world. In Jesus' name, amen.